It was after midnight in a quiet town buried under snow when a veteran police officer slowed his car near an abandoned football field. At first, he thought he saw trash blowing across the ice. Then the shape tried to stand and fell back down. What he found in that frozen darkness was a 4-month-old German Shepherd puppy who had learned to stop crying because no one came. That night, one man made a choice to stay when walking away would have been easier. And that choice changed 2 lives forever. As you watch this story unfold, ask yourself, where are you watching from today, and leave a comment below. And if stories of hope, courage, and second chances matter to you, please subscribe to our channel to support and stay with us for more stories like this. Northbridge, Colorado lay under the kind of winter that pressed down on everything. Rooftops, roads, even breath itself. Snow had fallen steadily for 2 days, thick and heavy, erasing tire tracks almost as soon as they appeared and muting the town into a hush that felt both peaceful and watchful. Northbridge was not a large city. It was a mountain town that survived on routine and familiarity. People knew one another by first name, waved at the same corners, complained about the same winters, and trusted that nothing truly terrible happened after midnight. On that night, the temperature hovered well below freezing. The wind slid through empty streets like a restless animal, and the high school football field sat dark behind a rusted chain-link fence, officially closed since November and forgotten until spring. Officer Samuel Carter, 58 years old, drove his patrol cruiser slowly along the adjacent road, the tires crunching softly over packed snow. Samuel was a tall man, just over 6 feet, with a frame that had thinned with age but not weakened. His shoulders still carried the habit of authority, though his posture had softened over the years, bending slightly forward as if the weight of time leaned on him. His hair, once dark brown, was now mostly gray, cut short in a practical style that required no attention. Deep lines framed his mouth and eyes, the kind earned not from anger, but from long nights of listening, to victims, to suspects, to people who needed someone to stand still while their world shook. His eyes were a steady blue, observant without being sharp, the eyes of a man who had learned patience the hard way. Samuel had spent nearly 30 years on the force. In that time, he had learned that trouble did not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it appeared quietly, half-hidden, hoping no one noticed. That belief guided the way he drove, slower than the younger officers, scanning corners others dismissed, trusting instinct more than speed. He was months away from retirement, counting the days not with excitement but with a cautious respect, as if stepping away from the badge required permission from the years he had given it. As his headlights swept across the football field, something near midfield caught his attention. At first glance, it looked like debris. A dark mound against the white expanse, perhaps a torn tarp or a bundle of windblown trash. Storms had a habit of rearranging the world. Samuel almost passed it by. Then the shape moved. It rose slightly, wavered, and collapsed back into the snow. Samuel's foot eased off the accelerator. His body reacted before his mind fully caught up, the practiced reflex of a man who had seen too many moments turn irreversible when ignored. He slowed the cruiser to a stop, the headlights fixed on the field. The shape moved again, weaker this time, as if the effort itself had been a mistake. He cut the engine and stepped out into the cold. The air bit immediately, sharp and unforgiving, seeping through his gloves and collar. His breath fogged in front of him as he walked toward the broken section of fence. The gate had been damaged during the storm, bent inward just enough to leave an opening where the snow drifted freely onto the turf. Samuel pushed it aside and stepped onto the field, boots sinking slightly into the powder. What lay near midfield was not debris. It was a German Shepherd puppy. The dog could not have been more than 4 months old. His body was small for the breed, all legs and narrow chest, but even that frame looked diminished by hunger and cold. His coat, black and tan, was dulled by ice and grime, the fur clumped together in stiff ridges where snow had melted and refrozen. A broken strip of nylon collar hung loosely around his neck, frayed and useless, the skin beneath rubbed raw and inflamed. His ears, still too large for his head, the way puppies often were, drooped rather than stood, weighed down by exhaustion. When Samuel approached, the puppy tried to stand again, his legs trembling violently, not from movement, but from weakness. After a second, he collapsed back into the snow, chest heaving shallowly. The puppy did not bark. He did not growl or bare his teeth. He did not attempt to flee. Instead, he pressed himself flat against the frozen turf, chin tucked down, eyes wide and glassy. It was not the look of aggression or defiance. It was the look of expectation, the quiet, dreadful anticipation of pain. Samuel recognized it immediately. He had seen the same posture in abused children during welfare checks, in people who had learned that resistance only made things worse. Fear, Samuel knew, taught the body before it ever reached the mind. He stopped several feet away and crouched slightly, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. His voice, when he spoke, was low and calm, not meant to command, but to exist. "Easy there," he said, though he suspected the words themselves mattered less than the tone. The puppy's eyes flickered toward him, tracking every motion, but his body remained still, rigid as if movement itself was dangerous. Samuel keyed his radio, turning slightly away to keep the sound from startling the dog. "Dispatch," he said quietly. "I've got a possible stray. Juvenile canine, German Shepherd, severe condition. Found on the high school field. I'm staying with him." His voice was steady, professional, but something underneath tightened as he spoke. Dispatch acknowledged, their reply routine, unaware that routine had just collided with something fragile. Animal control, he knew, would not arrive until morning. Winter staffing was thin, and this was not an emergency by their definition. Not yet. Samuel unbuttoned his patrol coat and slid it off, the cold immediately biting harder at his arms. He knelt slowly, joints protesting with a dull ache that reminded him of his age. Years ago, he might have ignored the pain. Now, he acknowledged it with a brief exhale and kept going. He held the coat in both hands and waited, giving the puppy time to process the movement. When he gently laid it over the dog's back, the puppy flinched sharply, muscles tensing, breath hitching. Then, when nothing followed, no blow, no shout, he froze, allowing the weight of the coat to settle. Through the thick fabric, Samuel could feel how thin the puppy was. Every rib pressed faintly against his palms. The dog's heart fluttered wildly, too fast, like it had been running long after there was nowhere left to go. Samuel withdrew his hands but remained close, creating a barrier between the puppy and the open field. Snow continued to fall lightly, dusting the coat and the dog beneath it. Samuel stayed there, kneeling in the snow, his breath rising and falling in steady clouds. He did not touch the dog again. He did not attempt to lift him or coax him to move. Experience had taught him that survival sometimes began with stillness, with the simple fact of being seen and not punished for it. The field remained silent, the town sleeping just beyond the fence, unaware that one small life had nearly slipped through the cracks of the night. As the minutes passed, Samuel adjusted his posture slightly, careful not to loom. His thoughts drifted, not to policy or paperwork, but to the long list of moments in his career when help had arrived just in time, and to the longer list of moments when it had not. He wondered how long the puppy had been there. Hours? Longer? He wondered who had last fastened that collar and why it now hung broken and abandoned. The puppy's breathing slowed marginally beneath the coat. His eyes remained open, watching Samuel with cautious intensity, but the rigid terror softened into something quieter. Not trust? Not yet. Something closer to confusion, an uncertainty about why the expected pain had not come. Samuel remained where he was until the cold crept deeper into his bones. He shifted his weight, careful not to disturb the dog, and leaned back slightly against his cruiser when his knees could no longer hold. He kept his gaze on the small shape under his coat, a silent promise in his presence. The night stretched on. Snow continued to fall, and on that forgotten football field, a man with a badge stood guard over a life the storm had almost taken, choosing, without ceremony, without witnesses, not to walk away. Night deepened over Northbridge with the patience of something that knew it would win eventually. The snow did not fall harder, but it fell longer, fine grains settling over the football field until the white grew smoother, quieter, more complete. The town beyond the fence slept on, its lights few and far between. its people tucked into beds believing that the worst dangers of winter came with sirens and headlines. On the field, under a borrowed patrol coat, a German Shepherd puppy learned that the night could stretch without ending, and that sometimes pain did not arrive when expected. Officer Samuel Carter remained nearby, his posture relaxed but alert, the way it had been trained into him over decades. He leaned against his cruiser now, arms crossed to preserve warmth, boots planted firmly in the snow. He did not pace. He did not hover. He understood instinctively that hovering could feel like threat. Samuel was not a large man by nature, but authority had shaped him into someone who occupied space carefully. His face, lit occasionally by the muted reflection of his headlights, held no urgency, only watchfulness. Long service had taught him that some moments demanded action, while others required restraint so complete it felt like doing nothing at all. The puppy lay beneath the coat, unmoving except for the shallow rise and fall of his chest. His body remained pressed low to the ground, muscles tight even in rest. Fear had carved itself into him early. Samuel could see it in the way the puppy's eyes tracked movement without turning his head, in how his ears twitched at every distant sound. The wind rattling the fence, the soft hum of the cruiser cooling, the faint echo of a truck passing somewhere in town. This was not the fear of a sudden scare. It was practiced fear, the kind learned through repetition. Samuel had seen this before, though never in quite this shape. During welfare calls, he had watched children who did not cry when spoken to harshly, who did not protest when guided by the arm, who learned that stillness shortened the duration of harm. Fear, Samuel knew, taught the body before it ever taught the mind. It rewired reflexes. It instructed muscles when to lock and when to disappear. Looking at the puppy now, Samuel felt a familiar tightening in his chest. Not pity, exactly, but recognition. He checked his watch. Just past 1 in the morning. Animal control would not arrive until daylight, even if dispatch marked it urgent. Northbridge did not have the resources of a city. Everyone wore multiple roles, and winter thinned them further. Samuel had known that the moment he radioed in, he had not hesitated. Some decisions did not require a committee. The cold grew sharper as the hours passed. Samuel shifted his weight occasionally, careful not to draw attention. Once, when he adjusted his gloves, the puppy flinched beneath the coat, body tensing as if bracing for impact. Samuel froze instantly, hands still, breath held. Several seconds passed before the tension eased again. The lesson was immediate and clear. Even small movements mattered. "I'm still here," Samuel said softly, more to the night than to the dog. He had learned long ago that reassurance did not always sound like comfort. Sometimes it sounded like consistency. Time stretched thin, measured not in minutes but in the gradual numbness of fingers and the ache in Samuel's knees. He crouched again at one point, lowering himself slowly until he was level with the puppy's line of sight. He kept his gaze averted, angled just enough that the dog could see him without feeling stared at. Eye contact, Samuel knew, could feel like pressure. The puppy's eyes were dark, almost too large for his face, the whites faintly visible when he glanced upward. There was intelligence there, unmistakable and sharp, but dulled by exhaustion. He was young, too young to have learned this much fear on his own. That knowledge settled heavily in Samuel's thoughts, though he did not follow it to its conclusion. Some questions did not need answers to be understood. Around 2:30, the puppy attempted to shift his position. His hind legs moved first, weak and uncertain, and he let out a sound so small it barely registered, a breathy whine, cut off almost immediately. His body trembled violently for a few seconds before he went still again. Samuel resisted the instinct to reach out. Instead, he spoke, low and even, his voice steady against the cold. "You're all right. Take your time." The words carried no expectation. The night wore on. Frost gathered along the edges of the cruiser's windows. Samuel stamped his feet once, quietly, to restore feeling, then stopped when the puppy's ears twitched again. He smiled faintly at himself, a dry, humorless acknowledgement of the situation. 30 years of training and still learning. Just before dawn, the sky lightened imperceptibly, the darkness thinning into a dull gray. Snowfall slowed, then ceased entirely, leaving the field pristine and unreal, as if untouched by suffering. Samuel straightened slightly, stretching his back with care. He radioed dispatch again, updating his status, his voice calm but firm. Animal Control confirmed they were en route. When the truck arrived, it did so without siren, its tires crunching softly over the snow. The Animal Control officer, a woman in her early 40s named Linda Hayes, stepped out. She was average height with a sturdy build suited to the work, her brown hair pulled back into a tight bun beneath her knit cap. Linda had kind eyes but a no-nonsense demeanor, shaped by years of balancing compassion with procedure. She nodded to Samuel in greeting, her gaze immediately dropping to the small shape under the coat. "Poor thing," she murmured, keeping her voice low. She crouched a few feet away, assessing without advancing. "How long's he been here?" "All night," Samuel replied. "Found him just after midnight." Linda exhaled slowly. "That explains the condition." She prepared the transport crate with practiced efficiency, moving deliberately, minimizing sound. "We'll take him in under a 72-hour stray hold. Warm him up, get him checked." Samuel nodded, already familiar with the protocol. Still, something tightened in his jaw. He knelt once more beside the puppy as Linda approached with the crate. When she reached for the edge of the coat, the puppy flinched sharply again, muscles locking, breath hitching. Samuel reacted instantly, placing his hand flat on the snow between them, not touching the dog, just anchoring the moment. "Easy," he said quietly. The puppy's eyes flicked to him, searching. After a second, he stilled. Linda paused, watching the exchange. "He trusts you," she said, surprised. Samuel shook his head gently. "No," he replied. "He just knows I haven't hurt him yet." Together, carefully, they transferred the puppy into the crate, wrapping the coat around him to preserve warmth. The puppy did not resist, but his body remained tense, every muscle prepared for what might come next. Samuel stayed close until the door latched securely. As Linda loaded the crate into the truck, Samuel stepped back, the cold suddenly sharper without the focus of vigilance. He watched as the vehicle pulled away, its taillights fading into the pale morning. The field was empty again. Samuel stood alone for a moment, breathing in the cold air, feeling it settle deep in his chest. The night had taken its toll, but it had not taken everything. He returned to his cruiser, hands stiff, heart heavy but steady, and drove back toward town as Northbridge began to wake, unaware of how close one small life had come to disappearing beneath the snow. Morning arrived in Northbridge without ceremony. The sky lightened from gray to a pale, washed-out blue, and the town resumed its careful winter rhythm. Plows scraping the roads, shop lights flickering on, coffee brewing behind frosted windows. For most people, it was an ordinary weekday. For the German Shepherd puppy wrapped in a borrowed patrol coat, it was the first time in days, perhaps longer, that warmth arrived without cost. The Animal Control truck rolled into the municipal shelter yard just after 7. Inside the crate, the puppy lay curled tightly, his body arranged to occupy as little space as possible. He was still shivering, though less violently now, his breath shallow but steady. His eyes remained open, tracking movement through the bars without lifting his head. Fear had not left him with the night. It had simply learned to wait. Linda Hayes moved with practiced efficiency as she unloaded the crate. She had worked Animal Control for nearly 15 years, long enough for compassion to become muscle memory rather than sentiment. In her early 40s, Linda carried herself with the quiet sturdiness of someone who lifted heavy things and heavier truths. Her face was open, kind without being indulgent, and her voice, when she used it, was measured, designed to soothe without promising more than the day could give. She placed the crate in the intake area and knelt, keeping her movements slow. "You're safe for now," she murmured, though she knew the words were more for herself than for the dog. Safety, she had learned, was a process, not a location. The intake room smelled faintly of disinfectant and wet fur. Fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead. Another staff member, a young man named Eric, mid-20s, thin, earnest, still new enough to flinch at suffering, hovered nearby with a clipboard. He glanced at the puppy and swallowed. "He looks bad," he said quietly. "He's young," Linda replied, not unkindly. "That counts for something." It was not a guarantee, but it was the closest thing to hope procedure allowed. The puppy was logged as a stray. No microchip registered when the scanner passed over his thin neck. No matching reports had come in overnight. Under shelter policy, he was placed on a 72-hour stray hold, a legal pause designed to give owners a chance to come forward. Temporary, conditional. Words that sounded neutral but carried weight. While the paperwork progressed, Officer Samuel Carter arrived at the shelter. He'd gone home briefly to change clothes, but sleep had not come. He wore a heavy wool sweater now beneath his jacket, his badge clipped to his belt more from habit than necessity. His face looked older in the daylight, the lines deeper, his eyes rimmed with fatigue. Still, he stood straight, hands steady, as if the night had not hollowed him out. Samuel was not required to be there. Once the dog was transferred, his involvement could have ended. Instead, he stood quietly near the intake room, observing without interfering. Linda noticed him and nodded in acknowledgement. "You stayed with him all night," she said. It was not a question. Samuel nodded once. "Didn't seem right to leave." They worked around the puppy together, checking vitals, documenting injuries, arranging a veterinary consult. Throughout it all, the dog remained silent. When hands approached, he stiffened but did not resist. When lifted briefly to be weighed, his muscles locked, breath held, eyes wide. He endured the process the way one endures weather, by waiting for it to pass. The vet on duty, Dr. Helen Moore, arrived mid-morning. She was in her late 50s, with silver hair pulled back into a low ponytail and glasses perched low on her nose. Years of practice had given her an economy of motion and a gentleness that did not waste energy. She examined the puppy carefully, her touch light, her voice calm. "He's severely underweight," she said, more to the chart than to the room. "Dehydrated, likely parasitic load, mild anemia, and these abrasions—" She paused, examining the skin beneath the broken collar. "These aren't fresh." Samuel listened from the doorway, his jaw tightening imperceptibly. Linda met his gaze briefly, then looked away. Some truths did not need witnesses. Dr. Moore straightened. "This didn't happen overnight," she said quietly. "He's been on his own a while. Or worse." She did not finish the sentence. She didn't have to. The puppy was moved to a quiet holding kennel, padded with blankets and positioned away from the louder areas of the shelter. The environment was controlled, warm, predictable, everything his body said he needed, even if his instincts refused to believe it yet. Food was offered in small amounts, carefully measured. He ate quickly, eyes darting, stopping often as if expecting interruption. When no one took the bowl away, he resumed, slower this time, confused by the absence of threat. Samuel watched from outside the kennel. He did not speak. He did not crouch. He simply remained where he was, visible but unobtrusive. At one point, the puppy lifted his head slightly and looked at him. There was no recognition, not truly. But there was something else, a flicker of uncertainty, as if the dog were trying to reconcile this quiet man with the night he had survived. Linda approached Samuel with the foster paperwork just before noon. "We'll need an emergency foster," she said, "just until the hold clears. He's too fragile for the general kennels." Samuel took the papers without hesitation. His hands were steady as he signed. Temporary guardian. The word settled into him with unexpected weight. Temporary meant there were limits. It meant honesty, no promises he could not keep. At Samuel's house, the kitchen became neutral ground. The puppy was carried in gently, placed near the wall farthest from doors and windows. He retreated immediately into the corner, curling in on himself, making his body small again. The room was quiet, warm, filled with unfamiliar smells. Coffee, wood, winter coats drying near the vent. Every sound made him flinch. The refrigerator hum, the creak of the floor, the distant bark of a neighbor's dog. Samuel moved slowly, narrating his actions aloud in a low voice, not to instruct but to announce his presence. "I'm going to put the bowl down," he said. "I'm stepping back now." He did not approach the corner. He did not reach. He placed food and water within easy distance and retreated, giving the puppy control over whether to eat. The dog ate with urgency, then froze, listening, waiting for the correction that never came. That night, Samuel did not sleep in his bed. He spread a blanket on the kitchen floor, 10 feet from the corner, far enough not to intrude, close enough to be seen. He lay on his back, hands folded over his chest, eyes open in the dark. The house settled around them. Pipes ticked softly. The wind brushed against the windows. The puppy did not move from the corner. But he watched. Fear lingered, stubborn and learned. Samuel understood that. He had lived with his own versions of it for years, memories that arrived uninvited, habits formed under pressure. Change, he knew, came slowly, if at all. So he made no promises, not even to himself. He told only the smallest truths. That he would stay, that the night would pass, that for now nothing else was required, and in the quiet space between them, that was enough. The veterinary clinic on Maple Street sat low and practical, a squat brick building that had weathered Northbridge winters for decades. Snow lined its roof in thick layers, and the parking lot bore the familiar scars of plows and chains. Inside, the air carried the clean, sharp scent of antiseptic, layered with something warmer beneath. Animal fur, coffee, and the quiet determination of people who showed up before dawn because lives required it. Samuel Carter parked close to the entrance and shut off the engine. The puppy lay bundled on the passenger seat, wrapped carefully in a blanket that smelled faintly of detergent and old cotton. His body remained tense even in sleep, limbs drawn in, breath shallow but steady. He had not cried during the drive. He had not moved much at all. The cold no longer gnawed at him. But his body did not yet trust the absence of pain. Samuel lifted him carefully, mindful of the way the puppy stiffened at sudden changes in position. He moved slowly, keeping the dog close to his chest, as if proximity might lend stability. The puppy's ears flicked once, then settled. His eyes opened briefly, dark, uncertain, then closed again. Inside the clinic, the receptionist, a woman in her early 50s named Carol, looked up from her desk. She was small, round-shouldered, with soft gray curls and a habit of speaking gently even when efficiency demanded speed. "You must be the shepherd from animal control," she said quietly, already rising. "Exam room 3 is ready." Samuel nodded his thanks and followed her down the hallway. The walls were lined with photographs, rescued animals, grateful families, aging dogs who had clearly been loved well beyond their youth. Samuel noticed them absently, his focus fixed on the small weight in his arms. Dr. Helen Moore entered moments later. In the daylight, she looked exactly as she had at the shelter. Composed, silver-haired, glasses balanced low, her presence radiating calm. She had spent more than 30 years as a veterinarian in Northbridge, long enough to know that healing required patience as much as skill. Her voice when she spoke was steady and unhurried. "Let's take a look at you," she said, not smiling, but kind. The examination unfolded methodically. Dr. Moore narrated each step, not for the puppy's benefit, but for Samuel's. "We'll start with hydration, then blood work." She checked gums, palpated the abdomen gently, examined the ears and eyes. Each touch was careful, deliberate, respectful of boundaries the puppy did not yet know how to lower. When she reached the broken collar line, she paused slightly. The abrasions beneath were old, partially healed but still angry, evidence of friction and neglect. "This didn't happen overnight," she said again, softer this time. "He's been wearing something too tight for too long, or tied." She did not speculate further. Speculation had no place here. The puppy remained silent throughout the exam, muscles tight but compliant. When the blood draw began, he flinched, a sharp intake of breath escaping him, then went still again, eyes fixed on a point beyond the wall. Samuel stood close, one hand resting lightly on the exam table, not touching the dog, but present. His jaw tightened. He felt the familiar urge to intervene, to shield, to end discomfort before it could settle. Years on the force had taught him restraint. Some things had to be endured to be survived. Dr. Moore straightened when she finished. Parasites, she confirmed. Nothing uncommon, but significant. Dehydration, mild anemia. His body's been running on reserves it doesn't have. She removed her gloves and looked directly at Samuel. The good news is that he's young. Young bodies are stubborn. They fight. Samuel exhaled slowly. And the rest? The rest will take time, she said. Warmth, nutrition, quiet, and consistency. She paused, then added, no miracles, just patience. The word lingered between them. Samuel nodded. He had never trusted miracles. He trusted work. Back at Samuel's house, the afternoon light filtered through the windows, pale and clean against the snow outside. The puppy was placed gently on a thick blanket near the same kitchen corner he had claimed earlier. The room was quiet. Samuel moved with deliberate slowness, setting down a small bowl of water, then retreating. The puppy watched every movement, eyes tracking, body tense, but did not retreat further. That, Samuel recognized, was progress measured in millimeters. As evening settled in, the house grew still. Samuel prepared a simple meal for himself, the sounds of chopping and sizzling carefully controlled. Each noise drew the puppy's attention, but not panic. He ate when the bowl was placed within reach, slower now, stopping occasionally to listen. When no interruption came, he resumed, confused but grateful. The vet's words echoed in Samuel's thoughts as he cleaned the dishes. Young bodies are stubborn. They fight. He watched the puppy from the corner of his eye, noting the way his breathing had eased, the way his shoulders no longer shook with each inhale. Fear remained, etched deep, but exhaustion had loosened its grip. Later, as snow began to fall again outside the windows, something unexpected happened. Samuel was seated at the kitchen table, reviewing paperwork from the shelter, when he felt a brief, almost imperceptible weight against his leg. He froze. The puppy stood beside him, head lowered, body rigid. He did not lean fully. He did not press close. He simply rested his head lightly against Samuel's knee, testing the idea as one tests ice before stepping onto it. Samuel did not move. Seconds passed. The puppy withdrew, retreating to his corner as if embarrassed by the risk he had taken. Samuel remained still long after, breath held, heart pounding harder than it had during any chase in recent memory. He released the breath slowly, careful not to let hope outrun reality. When the moment had passed, Samuel spoke aloud, the words forming without planning. Ash, he said quietly. The puppy's ears flicked. We'll call you Ash. The name hung in the air, unclaimed but offered. Not because the dog was broken, not because he needed to be reduced to what had burned him, but because something had endured the fire. Something had survived long enough to be found. Samuel leaned back in his chair, eyes on the small shape curled once more in the corner. Snow tapped softly against the glass. The house breathed around them. He made no promises beyond the night. He did not imagine futures. He let the name exist without expectation. And for the first time since the football field, the puppy slept deeply, the borrowed warmth no longer a test, but a fact. Recovery did not arrive with ceremony. It came in fragments, measured in ounces instead of pounds, in minutes of calm instead of hours of ease. Ash grew stronger but unevenly, as if his body argued with itself over what it could afford to heal first. His appetite improved, then faltered. His legs steadied, then trembled again without warning. Fear lingered longest of all, clinging to him like a shadow that refused to believe the sun would return. Samuel Carter learned quickly that progress rarely moved in straight lines. Each morning began with quiet routines, small meals prepared carefully, water refreshed, medication administered with patience rather than force. Ash tolerated Samuel's presence more now, no longer flattening himself at every movement, but trust remained cautious. He slept deeply, yet startled awake at sudden sounds. He followed Samuel from room to room at a distance, eyes always alert, measuring space as if escape routes were still necessary. The walks began short and tentative. The first time Samuel clipped the leash onto Ash's collar, The dog froze, body stiffening, breath shallow. Samuel waited, crouched nearby, speaking calmly, letting time do the work his hands could not. Eventually, Ash took a step, then another. Outside, the world was still wrapped in winter, the ground hard beneath a thin crust of snow, the air sharp and clean. Ash walked with his head low, ears flicking constantly, but he walked. Weeks passed like this, slow and uncertain. Samuel noticed the smallest changes, the way Ash's tail lifted slightly when he heard Samuel's voice, the way his eyes softened when food arrived reliably, the way his breathing eased during sleep. Samuel did not celebrate these moments aloud. He had learned, long ago, that naming hope too quickly could frighten it away. Then came the afternoon that broke the fragile rhythm. The sky was heavy with low clouds, the kind that promised snow but had not yet decided. Samuel had taken Ash for their usual short walk, staying close to the house, mindful of the cold. Ash moved more confidently now, his steps surer, his body beginning to resemble the shape it had always been meant to take. Halfway down the block, Ash slowed. Samuel noticed immediately. He stopped, crouching slightly, watching the dog's posture. Ash's legs trembled. Before Samuel could reach him, Ash staggered and collapsed into the snow, his body folding as if the strength had simply drained out of him. He did not cry out. He did not struggle. He lay still, sides heaving shallowly, eyes unfocused. Samuel reacted without thought. He scooped Ash into his arms, the dog lighter than he should have been, his body limp with exhaustion. Snow stung Samuel's face as the wind picked up, but he barely noticed. His heart pounded harder than it had during any pursuit in recent memory, a deep, urgent rhythm that drowned out everything else. He carried Ash back to the house, then to the car, hands shaking as he wrapped him in blankets and turned the ignition. The drive to the clinic felt endless. Samuel spoke aloud the entire way, his voice steady, even as fear pressed in. "Stay with me," he said. "Just stay." He did not know if Ash could hear him. He did not know if the words mattered. He said them anyway. At the clinic, the staff moved quickly. Dr. Helen Moore was there within minutes, her calm sharpening into focus as she assessed Ash's condition. Fluids were started immediately. Heat packs were applied. Monitors hummed softly, a mechanical vigil that filled the room with sound. Ash's body temperature was low, his heart rate erratic. "His body's still paying old debts," Dr. Moore said quietly to Samuel as they worked. Her tone was honest, unsoftened by false reassurance. "He burned through reserves he didn't have. Tonight matters." Samuel nodded, gripping the edge of the exam table as if anchoring himself. He had heard variations of that sentence before, in hospital corridors, at accident scenes, in rooms where the air felt too thin. Tonight matters. It meant everything and nothing at once. The night stretched long and unforgiving. Samuel sat beside the crate, fingers curled around the cold metal bars, his posture rigid with vigilance. He did not sleep. He barely blinked. Every change in the monitor's rhythm pulled his attention sharp. He whispered to Ash in low tones, promises forming before he had time to question them. Promises about walks in warmer weather, about quiet mornings, about staying. Dr. Moore checked in periodically, her presence steady and unobtrusive. "He's holding," she said once, hours in. "That's something." Later, closer to dawn, she said, "He's still fighting." Each update was small, but Samuel clung to them like markers on a dark road. Outside, the storm arrived at last, snow tapping insistently against the clinic windows. Inside, time lost its shape. Samuel's thoughts drifted. Memories of nights spent waiting for outcomes he could not control, of decisions that had altered lives with a single moment's delay. He wondered, briefly, if this was the price of caring, if opening himself to another living thing meant accepting the risk of loss again. The thought passed. The answer, he realized, had always been the same. Sometime just before morning, Ash's breathing steadied. The monitor's rhythm smoothed into something less frantic. Dr. Moore approached Samuel with a tired smile that held more relief than triumph. He made it through the worst of it, she said. He's not out of danger yet, but he's here. Samuel closed his eyes for a long moment, the tension draining from his shoulders in a slow, shuddering release. When he opened them, Ash lay still but warm, his chest rising and falling with a fragile consistency. Samuel reached out, resting his fingers lightly against the crate, not touching, just close enough to feel the truth of the moment. Ash survived. Spring did not arrive all at once after that night. It came cautiously, the way Ash learned to trust, first in warmer afternoons, then in patches of grass revealed beneath melting snow. Ash's strength returned slowly, but it returned. His fear softened at the edges, no longer sharp, no longer constant. He learned that collapse did not always follow effort, that sleep could come without vigilance, that hands could mean comfort. Samuel noticed that Ash began to watch the world with curiosity instead of calculation. He sniffed the air longer. He lingered at doorways, not to escape, but to observe. Trust, Samuel understood, was not a switch. It was a series of small decisions, made over and over again until they formed something solid. The longest night had passed, and with it, the understanding that survival was not the end of the story, but the beginning of learning how to live. Winter loosened its grip on Northbridge reluctantly, as if unwilling to admit defeat. Snow retreated in uneven patches, revealing dull grass beneath, flattened and pale but alive. The mountains still wore white crowns in the distance, but the town itself began to breathe again. Roofs dripped in the afternoons. Roads darkened where ice surrendered. People lingered outside longer, coats unbuttoned, conversations stretching as if everyone needed proof that the season was truly changing. Ash noticed the change before Samuel did. He lingered at windows, nose close to the glass, watching melting snow slide from branches. He stepped onto bare patches of ground with cautious curiosity, sniffing deeply, as though memorizing a world that felt newly possible. His body had filled out slowly, muscle returning in careful increments. His coat, once dull and matted, now carried a soft sheen in the light. Scars remained beneath the fur, invisible to most, but present all the same. Fear still lived in him, but it no longer commanded every movement. Samuel watched these changes quietly, the way he had watched everything important in his life. He was 68 days from retirement, though he rarely spoke the number aloud. The station buzzed with good-natured commentary, jokes about fishing plans, questions about whether he would miss the radio crackle at night. Samuel smiled when required, deflected when he could. The badge still rode on his belt, heavy and familiar, but its days were numbered. He felt no bitterness about that. Only a measured sadness, like saying goodbye to a language you once spoke fluently. One clear morning, with the sky washed clean and the air sharp but gentle, Samuel clipped Ash's collar on and reached for the leash. Ash stood still, watching the motion, ears flicking once. When the leash attached, he did not freeze. He did not pull away. He waited. Samuel paused, studying him. "You ready?" he asked softly. Ash did not answer, of course, but his tail moved once, slow and deliberate. They drove across town with the windows cracked, cold air carrying the smell of thawing earth and distant pine. Samuel parked near the high school, the same one whose field had gone unnoticed for years until a winter night forced it back into relevance. The fence had been repaired since then, the bent gate straightened and secured. The field looked ordinary now, bordered by quiet bleachers and a scoreboard that had not lit up since fall. Daylight stripped the place of its menace. It was just a field again. Samuel and Ash approached on foot. Ash slowed as they neared the gate, his body tightening subtly, memory rising like an old ache. Samuel did not urge him forward. He waited, one hand loose on the leash, the other resting easily at his side. The wind moved through the field, stirring grass, carrying sounds that were no longer muffled by snow. After a moment, Ash stepped forward. The turf was damp beneath his paws, cool but forgiving. He stopped near midfield, head low, scanning the space as if expecting the night to reassert itself. His muscles tensed. Samuel watched from several steps back, resisting the instinct to intervene. He had learned that this too was part of staying, allowing space for decisions to be made without pressure. Samuel moved toward the bleachers and sat down, the metal cold but solid beneath him. He rested his elbows on his knees and waited. Time passed. Ash stood still, breathing in the open air. His ears shifted, listening. His tail lifted slightly. The field remained silent, holding nothing but daylight and possibility. Slowly, the tension in Ash's body eased. He took a tentative step forward, then another. His gait was careful at first, as if testing whether the ground would betray him. Then, without warning, Ash ran. Not fast at first, not recklessly. Just enough to feel the stretch of muscle, the coordination returning, the certainty that his legs would hold. He circled once, then again, each loop wider than the last. His stride lengthened, his ears lifted. His body moved the way it had always been meant to move. Samuel felt something in his chest loosen, a tightness he had not known was still there. He did not call out. He did not clap or cheer. He watched, hands resting quietly on his knees, letting the moment belong to the dog who had earned it. Ash ran because he could. Eventually, he slowed, breath quick but steady, tongue lolling slightly as he turned back toward Samuel. He did not approach immediately. He stood, watching, as if checking whether this freedom carried conditions. Samuel met his gaze and smiled, small and unassuming. After a moment, Ash trotted over and sat a few feet away, close but not pressed against him. Samuel reached out then, resting his hand briefly on Ash's shoulder. The contact was calm, mutual, unremarkable, and because of that, profound. They left the field not long after. There was nothing more to prove there. Samuel retired later that year, just as planned. The ceremony was modest. A plaque, a handshake, words spoken about service and dedication. He accepted them with quiet grace. At home, the badge went into a drawer alongside old photographs and letters he had never thrown away. The radio fell silent. Mornings grew slower. Ash adjusted easily to the change. He followed Samuel through the house, not out of fear, but companionship. Walks became longer. Afternoons stretched. The world no longer felt like something to survive. Some winters, Samuel reflected, did not end when the snow melted. Some ended when someone chose to stay long enough for fear to loosen its grip. And some things, trust, endurance, the will to run again, were never taken by the cold at all. This story reminds us that miracles do not always arrive with thunder or light from the sky. Sometimes God's miracles come quietly through ordinary people who choose compassion when no one is watching. A broken puppy survived not because of strength, but because someone stayed. In our daily lives, we may not face snowstorms or midnight fields, but we all meet moments when someone is cold, scared, or forgotten. And in those moments, God often works through our hands, our patience, and our willingness to love without guarantee. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment below and tell us what this story meant to you. If you believe that God still works miracles through kindness, comment Amen so we can pray together. Please subscribe to our channel to support more stories that lift the heart and remind us that love, faith, and mercy still matter. May God bless you and your family, and may you always be the reason someone survives the night.